Hello friends, and welcome to a vampire reading vlog. My name is Lena, and this is where I talk about books and life and being an art teacher. In this week's vlog, I am doing a Dracula-inspired vampire reading vlog. The idea for this came during Summerween, which was a few weeks ago. And while I was reading my already established TBR, I thought to myself, man, I'm really in the mood for some vampires. And that mood doesn't hit very often. It's a very specific mood to be in the mood for vampires, I feel. But alas, the mood struck. And not just any old vampires, but vampires that are somehow Dracula adjacent, if you will. Over my birthday, while doing my birthday reading vlog, I also found time to reread Dracula. I've always really enjoyed Dracula, and that's because I am a huge sucker for the Universal monsters. So I grew up loving Universal monsters, and I still do to this day. Although Creature is my favorite, when I was younger and before I had been exposed to Creature from the Black Lagoon, Dracula was my favorite. It's interesting because now as I'm older, I would say like my top two are probably Creature and Frankenstein. But I think that's because I'm a sci-fi girly and there are a lot of science fiction elements in both of those stories. So I think that that's where that love comes from. But anyway, so I reread Dracula. Oh my God, it's so good. If you have not read it, please do, because I don't think any of the film adaptations do it justice, like at all. I feel kind of like they are their own entities. And if you are intimidated by it, if you listen to the audiobook, especially the Audible edition, one of the characters is voiced by Alan Cumming. Oh my God, that version is so good. It is so good. He reads for Dr. Seward. And Tim Curry reads for Van Helsing. Oh my, it's perfection. The idea of vampires too have become a lot more scary, I feel like, because like that idea of like truly not having control scares me more. As an adult, vampires are scary. They're scary. I have some vampire books here set aside. I do have Dracula here. It's the Puffin Classics edition. So one that I would like to read is Carmilla, because that is pre-Dracula. So this book was written before Dracula. And I mean, it says on it the book that inspired Dracula. I don't know if it really did. Like if Bram Stoker read this and was like, yeah, I'm going for this. I'm going to write a vampire book too. I don't know that happened. This looks like it'll be a really like quick read because it is definitely short. It's a novella. I have one that was on my shelf that this I don't think has any connection to Dracula other than being about vampires, but House of Hunger. This is just one that I've been interested in reading. So if at the end I have more time for vampire reading before I want to get this vlog up, then I might do this one as a bonus read. But my Dracula related books here, the first one that I couldn't resist, I had to start with it because this one is actually also a reread, because I went through it really fast last fall, and so I wanted to experience it again and, you know, just take more notes and be more active with it. And that is Dracula. This is by Dacre Stoker and J.D. Barker. So Dacre Stoker he manages the Stoker estate. He's the great-grand nephew of Bram Stoker. This is so interesting because it follows Bram Stoker with his siblings, his sister Matilda and his brother Thornley. It's told like through diary entries and letters, just like how Dracula is told. They're like recalling all of these things from their childhood, things that have happened to them and people that they have encountered. What is happening? How are these people the way that they are? It like leads you to believe that this is how Bram Stoker came up with the story of Dracula and how he encountered vampires in real life and chose to tell the story of Dracula. The other two are ones that are new to me, and these follow the Brides of Dracula. So the first one is A Dowry of Blood. S.T. Gibson gives like an amazing author's note at the beginning that tells you basically all the trigger warnings. I love that list is there so that you can be prepared going in, or if you're like, this one's not going to be good for my mental health, you can just set it back on the shelf and keep moving. I think that's amazing. I think this follows Dracula's first wife, and then I have Deathless Girls. All of Kieran Millwood Hargrave's books have the most beautiful covers. Take a moment, take it all in. Quote on the back says, "I used to think to make people feel afraid was a curse, an awful thing, but I'd love for them to fear me. I want them to look up at me and weep." I love some feminine destruction energy. So if you have recommendations on your favorite vampire books, drop it in the comments. I like a scary vampire. You know, I had my time with Edward when I was in college, and it was great, and I loved him at the time, but I have moved on, and now I'm afraid of vampires. For now, I have at least these three and possibly Carmilla. Those are my reading plans. So I just finished my Dracula reread. I went through it quite fast because I was listening to the audiobook while physically reading it. I find that for me, I experience a story to its fullest when I do it in that format. But I forgot how this book ends and how chilling some of the final scenes are. Oh, it's so good. And you have to read the author's note when you're done, because the author's note just gives the story so much extra. It just clues you in just about where this story came from and how it came to be. It's just so good. It's so creepy. I had a great time. I loved it. I am going to start a Dowry of Blood tonight because the baby is already asleep and Topher's pretty tired. I just kind of have some time to myself, so I'm gonna start A Dowry of Blood. So just coming in with a little halfway update on A Dowry of Blood. If you are triggered by stories filled with gaslighting, then I would maybe not recommend this one. There's a lot. Not that I would think that Dracula would be like the best partner ever or the nicest guy, but it's still triggering. But I'm okay. So far, I'm like halfway, and it is going as could be expected for a woman in a relationship with an abusive vampire. So yeah. And I think that we are gonna go to the store and I'm gonna pick up some ingredients, and I wanna make like a vampire inspired cocktail tonight. I gotta figure out what ingredients I need. I'll see you a little bit later when it's time for happy hour. Hey again. I can't have the AC or a fan on when I'm recording, so I apologize for how sweaty I am. This, however, is not sweaty. I just got out of the shower is what that's all about. So, to be clear, I have finished 2 more vampire books since we last talked yesterday morning. I read both A Dowry of Blood and Carmilla. I enjoyed Carmilla while sipping on a vampire-inspired beverage. But if you like a boozy drink and you like a Manhattan, then I would recommend the intro by Carmen Maria Machado. It was so good. It like really frames the story in a feminist lens, and I loved it. Highly recommend this edition. The intro does give you, as a woman, a lot to be mad about, but the story is still really good and really enjoyable. And I think it'll probably be on like my regular October reading list, because I like to go back to a lot of the same like cozy, spooky stories that time of year. And next we have A Dowry of Blood, which if you know me at all, you know that I do not enjoy spice or smut in my books. To me, when I am reading smut or spice, it feels like probably how other people feel when they read body horror. Like, I just don't like reading about bodies, I guess. Unless, of course, I am reading a body horror and that's what I'm in the mood for. And so that's what I'm reading. I don't know. I don't know what my problem is. A Dowry of Blood, maybe a little spicy for me. It's interesting because this story is completely from the perspective of a vampire, which with most vampire fiction, you don't have that perspective. You're reading from the point of view of someone who is like closely connected to the vampire in some way. This was incredibly triggering though, and I know I said that during like my halfway point update, but oh my God. If you really do check the trigger warnings, I don't know that my mental health benefited from this experience. I don't know. There were just like a lot of things that like surprisingly were upsetting to me. When it comes to control and obsession in relationships and things like that, I get very just triggered and I have a hard time with it. So there you have it. Yeah, Dracula's a real dick in that one. Not that Dracula's ever a nice guy, but yeah, he's pretty horrible. Really controlling. Really awful. Awful. And so now I am reading Deathless Girls, which is a YA, which is probably good for me after reading A Dowry of Blood. Like, I'm probably ready for something just a little lighter. I had to go on Google and double check to make sure that this really was a Brides of Dracula story, because like as I'm reading, I'm like, wait, where are we? How is this connected? But I double checked and it says that it is, but we're not anywhere in vampire territory yet. Although there is a lot of clues that kind of tells you, oh, okay, I think this is vampires that we're dealing with here. But so far, oh my goodness, the writing is beautiful. But also, so amazing. So I'm really excited for this to take this story and turn it on its head and tell it in a feminist fashion. I am ready. Oh my God, this is so beautiful. So we have come to the end of our vampire reading vlog. I finished my last vampire book last night, The Deathless Girls. I really enjoyed this one. This one's YA, so I just kind of flew through it. There is a lot of build-up on like character building and introducing you to the world that they're in, or like the time period that they're in. I'm still not sure if this was in kind of like a fantasy realm or if it was supposed to be historical. I kind of had a hard time placing it. There really isn't a lot of gore or horror or anything until you get to about like the last quarter of the book. But once you get there, It is pretty nonstop. Things move super, super quick. You really were invested in the characters and you cared about them. It follows two sisters and how they come to be two of the brides of Dracula. I kind of liked that Dracula himself played such a small role in it because it doesn't then take away from the mystical persona that is Dracula. I'm a pretty slow reader, but I was still able to read the whole book in a day and a half and really enjoyed myself. As far as books that I enjoyed the most, not including Dracula, of course, because Dracula is like one of my favorite books. I mean, I still love Dracula, and I reread it because I loved it so much the first time, and that still holds true. And I really enjoyed Deathless Girls too. Well, okay, and I enjoyed Carmilla. I guess actually I enjoyed all of them quite a bit. The only one that I was kind of like, meh, was A Dowry of Blood, and I think that was just because it was so triggering and difficult for me to read. I am not one to read a lot of books that involve like abusive relationships and stuff, so that was rough. That was rough. It was rough. Well, it's okay. We're here. It's fine. I survived. We're good. So with that, thank you so much for following along on my little vampire reading adventure here. Again, in the comments, share your favorite vampire books. I would love recommendations. Spooky season is not far away. For some of us, it's already spooky season. If you haven't already, like and subscribe. Stick around. I would love it. And I will see you in the next one. Bye!